Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Tailboard Misfits podcast streaming here on Firefighter Nation. I'm your host, John Velez, and I'm here with Preston Lyons from the Rentless Rejects. Preston, what's up, brother?
Oh, man, doing good. How are you doing?
Man, I'm doing great. I'm excited about today. Obviously, you guys can already see who our guest is. It's none other than Robert Wynne, and we're going to get into him and his background here shortly. But first, we just want to say thank you for watching. And if you see any value or hear any value in this show, just please do us a favor and share it. You can also catch this on the Tailboard Misfits platform through YouTube and Apple and Spotify and all that good stuff. So without further notice, let's get into it. Robert, man, how you doing?
I'm doing really good, man. Super grateful and super blessed today. Thank you so much, both of you, for having me on.
Well, man, the first time I heard you talk, I think was on the Scrap, and I was taken back. I was like, first of all, you're one of the most well-spoken people that I think I've ever listened to, because you're so articulate, and the way you form your sentences, like, it's super intentional. And that really grabbed my attention at first. And then when we met at Firemanship, man, like, I don't know how to explain this, but a lot of times you see people on social media and they try to be someone that they're not. And then you meet them in person and it's kind of like they're exposing themselves, if you will. But you 100% are the same person that you see on the screen or listen to in podcasts as you are in person, and super humble and super, super caring about people. And so I appreciated that. And it was awesome to meet you there.
Those are very kind words, John. I appreciate that. It's something that is really important to me. I'm a role model to my kids, and what they see is what the expectation is from me, for them to model as young kids and growing up to be adults. So that's the driving and motivating factor. And of course, I couldn't be here, be who I am without God.
That's awesome. So real quick, before we get started, Preston, I just kind of want to start off and just for you to give you an opportunity to just kind of give a shout out to your family and start with family first and who they are to you, and if you want to share anything about them.
For those of you that don't know, I'm 35 years old. I work for CAL FIRE in the state of California. I'll keep it very short about my department because I'm more faith and family based than anything. We have about 12,000 employees. We are the state's fire department. We do everything from air operations to force management to Schedule A, which is our Type 1 engines, and Type 3s. It's a great department to work for. You can literally do anything that you want. And now the things that are the most important to me is my faith. I have a wonderful wife, Sandra. We're coming up on 5 years of marriage in March. Super excited about the 5-year anniversary. I got some things in store for her that should hopefully put a big smile on her face. And God has blessed us with 3 healthy children. I have a 3-year-old named Gianna. She's about 3.5 now. I have an 18-month-old named Natalie, and we just brought in a baby boy named Christian, who just turned 3 months earlier this month. They're all healthy. We're all blessed. We're very grateful. Being a dad is the greatest honor and job in the world.
Yeah, me and Preston feel the exact same way about being a dad, and family's super important to me, and I know it's super important to Preston. And it sounds like you're kind of in the same situation I was. All my kids are pretty close in age too, so I sympathize with you because I'm sure your house is pretty busy right now, having 3 kids pretty close together like that.
Yeah, and that's the challenging thing that I really have loved to really embrace, is the total chaos. And I think that kind of relates to the job too, right? Like a lot of us normalize chaos, or when we're working at a working fire or even a complex traffic collision, we kind of find that homeostasis in the chaos. And I've learned just to embrace that in my household and really just enjoy it. And it's challenging. And that's the beautiful thing about it, because as much as I find out about my wife and my kids, I feel that I'm finding out about a lot more of who I am and what I am not.
Man, I completely resonate with that when you said finding homeostasis in the chaos, and just in being in your household when it's chaotic and you got all the kids running around. You find the calm, and That's pretty cool I never really thought about that. You know what I mean? I tend to be pretty calm in my house with my 1-year-old terrorizing my wife and my wife just kind of losing her mind. And I'm just like, it is what it is. You know what I mean? We'll deal with it. We'll just prioritize what we need to prioritize and take care of it. That's all you really can do.
Yeah.
I love that. I've never heard of it explained that way. And I was sitting here thinking about it when you said it. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty accurate. Like, a lot of times, which you're totally living the same life I am at this point, like it is nothing but chaos in my house. And you can just kind of see like me and my wife are just pretty much used to it. So I love that. So we know you work for Cal Fire now, and thank you for telling us that, because I always like to hear about like departmental background as well, just so we all have context, because some of the issues that you might have might be completely foreign to what I have and what Preston has. Like it's all, relative really to the department and everything. So, but we know where you are now, but let's go back to the beginning and your childhood and the challenges you face, and just kind of walk us through that beginning stage of what it was like for you growing up.
So, for those of you that have heard me on the Fit to Fight Fire and the weekly scrap, this may be a little bit of a repeat, but I believe in transparency and vulnerability. I believe in the power of sharing each other's stories and being open about those things, because it's not a weakness. I believe that it's a strength. And, on those podcasts and even with my wife, just being open and vulnerable has allowed us to break through some of those barriers and things that have held us back. And I'll just start out at the age of 4 years old was the first time I was ever exposed to any physical, emotional, mental trauma from my father. And that's kind of where it all began for me. I am the oldest of my generation, and I have 2 younger sisters. And my dad just really beat the crap out of me when I was 4 years old. And my mom had to really make a tough decision. And in that decision, it took us through the court process. My mom wound up getting into the military by the age of 5.5, 6 years old. I didn't have a mom or a dad. And it was tough, man. I didn't know the type of trauma that created on me then, and how I had to deal with it growing up as a young adolescent into being a teenager and getting into the things that I did. So my grandparents, who are still alive today, I'm very grateful for their involvement in my life. I think Preston and I kind of talked about it before we actually started recording. Early on, they really kept me grounded. Like they gave me direction. My grandmother used to tell me all the time that I can be anything that I want in this world. And I didn't know what she meant when she told me that. I was just a little kid. I didn't know if I wanted to dress up as Spider-Man or Incredible Hulk. Like, I couldn't comprehend it with my child mind. And it wasn't until later when I matured where I really understood what she meant. And growing up, my grandparents put me in sports. They put me in baseball, football, basketball. I did all those things, which was great to be a part of that team environment, that competitive environment. And I had some really good friends growing up during Pop Warner football. But there was still a lot missing. I didn't have a mom or a dad. And those things continued to eat at me. And I wind up getting involved with the wrong crowd at a very early age, just seeking some of that acceptance and trying to fill that void of abandonment and neglect that I had received from my parents. And it just really took a hold of me, man. Those roots of abandonment, neglect, and acceptance has really started growing inside of my heart. And it really started to turn it cold, where I really didn't care anymore about the things that are important. And it led me down a path to where I started hanging around individuals that were selling drugs and doing drugs. And, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your perspective, I wind up trying to reestablish a relationship with my father and wind up selling drugs to my father and wind up ultimately doing drugs with my father. And at that moment, when I thought that it couldn't get any worse, it did. And I was doing drugs with my father and wind up getting arrested for robbery, a drug deal gone bad, and I was sentenced to state years in prison at 20 years old.
So a couple of things that I kind of wanted to just go back and talk about real quick. You talked about at 4 years old was the kind of the first time that you were really opened up to the like emotional and really physical abuse by your dad. You know, I could imagine that taking a toll on you as you're growing up. And just like out of curiosity, did you ever like, I'm sure you had to work through things with other like male role models in your life or just meeting a new male role model. And I'm sure there was some hesitancy there to really establish a relationship with them. And growing up, like after your dad, besides your grandpa, did you have any other like positive male role models in your life or someone that you tried to cling to or kind of had a feeling that you should be with?
That's a great question, John. When I look back, there were all kind of different role models. And I say that both in a positive and negative way. I believe in learned behavior. I believe in the things that you're exposed to have an influence on you, whether you embrace them or not. That old saying that if you hang around a barbershop long enough, you're going to get a haircut. And so, although there were male role models in my life, I think it was dominated by a lifestyle that was more detrimental to me than it was good. And there were a few people, a couple of my Pop Warner coaches, a couple of my elementary school teachers and things like that, that were good people. You know, they were doing the right thing. They had good boundaries. They had good expectations. They were normal people in society. And then on the flip side, you know, I had a lot of family. I had a lot of family friends that were not doing the things that they should be doing, that were involved in things that they shouldn't be involved in, that were in abusive relationships, that were abusing drugs. And I was exposed to that more often than I was exposed to the good ones. And so I like to look back and say that although there were a few people other than my grandfather who were good role models, I just didn't have enough exposure to them or a long enough time exposed to them for them to really impact me in the way that the negative ones did.
You know, I've tried to reflect on this stuff. Like your upbringing, though our paths are different, are similar, and we spoke about it before. My dad was abusive. He was in and out of my life. Also, I was constantly seeking his approval. I constantly wanted to be near him, even though I didn't realize at the time being near him was a negative thing. So I went down that path as well. And but then on the other side, you know, both my parents were young. They were 19 and 20 years old when they had me. But my mom was also in several abusive relationships, and I had to witness those as kids, like just dudes beating on my mom, and I'm helpless, 5, 6 years old, right? In some of the readings and some of the research on psychology and first responders, that is not necessarily uncommon. A lot of firefighters, law enforcement, military personnel, they come from some type of abuse or neglect in their childhood. And I think it's because, and this is just my journey, witnessing those things at such a young age and not being able to do anything about it, I think is what pushes us toward our desire to help people when we're older. I don't know if that's the same for you, but that's definitely where I think how I ended up in the fire service and in my military career.
Yeah, I would like to think, and I do believe that has played a part in my life. I have a huge desire in my heart to, you know, just really help people, just be better people. And what that looks like is just helping people where they're at and helping them get through whatever it is that they're getting through. But I like to relate it to, you know, I'm 35 years old. Like, are you guys talking to the 35-year-old Robert, or are you talking to the 4-year-old Robert? Because if we don't deal with a lot of those traumas or that baggage that we carry, it shows up in our lives, even as grown adults. The way that we respond to our wives when she says something that may trigger us, or when we see somebody disciplining their kid in a way that maybe isn't the correct way to be disciplining them, or maybe seeing videos on social media of women or men getting beat up or whatever the case may be. Like, that's not a 35-year-old man making that decision. Like, those are traumas that have came up through childhood that has allowed us to believe that that behavior is acceptable and okay with who we are today. And I think that it does play a huge role in what led me into the fire service, with just being to help people in their most vulnerable moments, because nobody was there to help me in my most vulnerable, or at least the people that said that they love me. You know, my mom and dad told me that they love me. And that's not the love that I want to show my children. That's not the love that I want to give to people that are in my inner circle.
Yeah, I've, like I told you earlier, I've heard your story several times, and there's a bunch of stuff that obviously is coming into my mind just based off what you're saying now and what I remember. And one of the things that I wanted to hit on is, as you talked about, like, as you got older, you started getting mixed up with the wrong crowds, and ultimately that led you down the path of getting arrested. But really, when I was sitting here thinking about it, whenever you start getting mixed up with those wrong crowds, you're just looking for acceptance. You're looking for the people that are trying to, or at least you think, love you and care about you and everything like that. And, not saying that your mom didn't. She made a choice to go join the military, but now you're there without your mom and your dad. And yes, your grandparents are there, but you're still like longing for that relationship with someone, that type of relationship with someone. And you get mixed up with these wrong crowds. And, I'd be willing to bet, like, whenever you did, that's what you were looking for, like the acceptance and the love from other people, and it just came in the wrong circumstances.
You hit it right on the head. And something that comes to mind for me, and with that specifically, is, my dad dealt with his addictions, and, my mom had to make a really tough decision. And, we've had adult conversations about it, on why she made the decision to get into the military and the sacrifices that she made, and the reasoning behind it. And, I can't say that I would have made a different decision. I wasn't in her shoes. I wasn't in that relationship. I wasn't exposed to the things that she was exposed to. She felt that she made the best decision for her children, to try to give them the best childhood possible. And we can't go back and change that. One thing that was a huge wake up call for me is the fire service can be really consuming. Any job that somebody is passionate about can be really consuming. And it really didn't hit me until we had our second kid. And, I was working a lot. I was working a lot of overtime, a lot of ordered overtime, forced overtime. And I was just gone a lot. And Preston, I kind of talked to you about this a little bit earlier, with having those uncomfortable conversations or crucial conversations with my wife, and hearing some of those things that I wasn't ready to hear, but I needed to hear. And one of those things was, my wife told me, she was like, "Robert, I feel alone." And, the checks are good. I love my job, right? I'm busy. I'm at work. I'm running calls. Like, I have no idea what's going on at home at all. I'm disconnected. And then in that conversation over a few weeks with my wife, God put it on my heart that, you are very close to being just like your dad. And, I prayed on it. I asked for a little bit more understanding in what he was trying to tell me. And, I share with people that my dad struggled with his addictions, and whatever he was dealing with took him out of our lives. But it doesn't matter if you're a drug addict or if you're 100% consumed in the job. Like, children need present parents. They need parents that are involved, participating, active in their lifestyle. And it definitely changed my perspective, because although I'm not a drug addict, although I'm not in prison, although, like, none of those horrible circumstances are taking me away from my kids, well, there's something that is taking me away from my kids. And the same effect that my dad had on me is the same effect that I was having on my young children. But they're two totally different ways of living. My dad struggled with drug addiction, and essentially I was at work, 20 days out of 30 in a month. And the child and the wife, my children and my wife, they don't know any different. That emotional and mental trauma that they're experiencing is no different if I was a drug addict or if I was in prison for a long period of time. Like the husband and the father is still not present. And you have to be really careful with the things that we allow to consume us. This job is one of the best jobs in the world. Like I would never give it up, ever. And sometimes I think this job can be a distraction for being a husband or a wife or a father to children, or even a brother or a son or an aunt or uncle or whatever the case may be. And we just have to really be situationally aware when it comes to that, to know that trauma is going to happen. We just need to make sure that it's positive trauma and not negative.
I feel pretty convicted right now, honestly.
Yeah, and Robert, you and I talked about a little bit of that too, right? And I listened to your conversation with John Sparrow about this, and we'll get into it, I'm sure. But you said you can't let the fire service be your identity. At a certain point, you had to, and we'll touch on that. But I think, and John and I have talked about this. John Velez and I have talked about this a lot. It's so easy to be into the job and listen to the podcasts and go to the conferences and buy the t-shirts and the hats and be surrounded by these guys and girls in the fire service and just feel so alive. But is that an addiction as well? You know what I mean? Like when people think addiction, they're like alcohol, opiates, heroin, or you know what I mean, methamphetamines, pornography. They think of these like ultra negative, toxic things, but our love and passion for the job is an addiction. It's what fills us. It's a dopamine hit for us. And sometimes it takes away from your focus on your family. And it's one of those hot button topics that a lot of into the job firemen don't want to hear, because it's so easy to say you're into the job and we do this for them, but don't make sure not to neglect your spouse and your kids at the same time.
Yeah, dude, I think this is a problem that 99% of all into the job firemen face, and myself included. Much like you, Robert, like, you know, I go through seasons where I work a crap ton of overtime, and there's times where I feel like I'm at work more than I'm at home. And through trial and error, right? Probably the same thing as you. I've learned that the balance, right? It's like, okay, I've been gone now. I need to be home, and you know, it does make me more, because of the trials and error, it does make me more aware that when I am home during those seasons that I'm super present and super intentional. And I'm not perfect. I suck at it a lot of times, but you know, it still does open your eyes to that fact. And I think that's a message that a lot of firemen need to hear, because, you know, I love when people say at the end of your career, like the fire service is gone, but you know, who's going to be left for you? And that's your family. And so you need to be investing in them just as much as you're investing in the fire service right now. So, like I said, I felt pretty convicted when you were talking about that, because I was like, man, that's super powerful, because it's so true. It's so true.
Well, John, none of us are perfect. And you know, there's people in the fire service that have it figured out, and it's going to be different for everybody. And then there's a lot of people in the fire service who don't have it figured out. And I struggle all the time. I'm somebody who falls short every single day. I can be better in many ways. And I think what's important to remember in all of this is what's important right here. Just 3 different people coming from all different parts of the country, all into the fire service, being vulnerable and open, talking about our struggles when it comes to family, talking about our struggles when it comes to the job, and just making it a safe place for it to be talked about without anybody really ridiculing anybody to say, you know, put those feelings away. There's no time or place for that. And I think that, you know, you guys said it on one of your previous podcasts. I believe one of you said is like, you know, we always talk about the fire service as family. You know, what type of family do you really want? You know, what type of people do we really want in our family? And for me, and Preston, for you, with the things that you shared with being exposed to as a young child, is like, do I want somebody in my family that is abusive? Do I want somebody in my family that's neglecting, you know, my needs? And I'm not saying that they're one and the same, but there is definitely that blend of personal and professional where they mix. Like, we're human before we're anything. And I think that if we continue the fight of really just trying to understand each other, we can go really far as a fire service, and just to really make the fire service better, but ultimately make each other better as people.
That's awesome. I love in your story whenever you get to prison, and I say love, like, understand context is everything. I don't like the fact that you went to prison, but it is who you are today. You're in prison and you go through a pretty big event, right? Like, you end up having to choose a side to hang with, and they ask you to do something that you don't want to do, and something pretty big happens that ultimately, if I remember correctly, ultimately kind of led you down the trajectory that you ended up on today. And if you don't mind sharing that, and like what you walked through and the things that came about, and like what happened on the other side of that event.
Yeah, I would say that was probably one of the most pivotal moments in my life. I never thought that God had that plan for me. Being relatively young, with the mindset that I had, walking into prison, was that I'm just going to do whatever I need to do to survive. And I was never really involved in gangs. I was never really involved in being a drug dealer or in the streets or anything like that. So, to be so truthful, like, I was just faking the funk, right? Like, I thought I was somebody that I wasn't. And in that environment, the reality is that you either are or you are not. There's people in there who are real killers. There's people in there that will murder somebody and go to sleep at night and not lose any sleep over it. And in my mind, like, I thought I was one of those people because that's what that place is full of. And one day, the specific group that I was with asked me to do something, and, like, man, I never harmed. Man, I was only in a couple fist fights as a kid, and I wouldn't even really call them fights, but they asked me to do something. They asked me to stab somebody, and I told them no. Like, I'm not going to do it. And in that environment, you're going to do what you're told, or you're going to be dealt with. And shortly after, I was dealt with. I was stabbed 7 times. And in that moment, I was fighting for my life. I didn't know I was stabbed. I wound up getting flown out on a helicopter from the prison. I went to the hospital. I was in a hospital for 8 days. I had 2 punctured lungs. I was stabbed 4 times in the front of my chest, 3 times in my back. And it was in that moment, being in the hospital for a few days, where God really just planted a seed, and it was watered shortly after. Growing up, I never really went to church. I think I went maybe a handful of times. Never was really introduced to the Bible. And after I got out of the hospital, I was sent to administrative segregation for the investigation. I was there for quite some time. I was in a cell by myself for a really long time. And all I did was just read. They had daily breads. I would read the daily bread every day. I would read the verses that they wanted you to read in the daily bread, and just really consume myself with that. And in that moment, I have begun to try to pray. I didn't know if I was praying correctly. And I shared this on Fit to Fight Fire podcast. I get so quiet in there, so quiet. And I just heard a voice that said, "Turn to me." And then I knew. But what I didn't know was that up until that point, I thought my life was pretty hard. Like, just dealing with the abandonment, neglect, and just being in prison and not coming home. I thought my life was pretty difficult. Well, little did I know, when I heard that voice of God telling me to turn to Him, my life was going to multiply in difficulty in so many ways. And so once I got out of administrative segregation, that's when the work really began. I had to essentially unbecome everything that I wasn't. So I had to deal with that abandonment. I had to deal with that neglect. I had to deal with those acceptance issues. And there's nowhere to run in there. There's nowhere to hide. There's not a lot of people that you can turn to in that environment just because of what that place is. There's not good people there. There's a lot of people dealing with a lot of the things that many of us have struggled with those traumas. And I wind up going to church, and I wind up going to a lot of self-help groups. And I really just fell in love with the process of diving deeper than the surface and really trying to understand who I was as a person, but more importantly, who I am not as a person. And it was the most difficult thing that I ever had to do. Going back to those early childhood traumas, trying to figure out why I felt the way that I did when my dad did what he did, why every time I seen my dad, I would cry, why every time my mom came home from military leave, it was like the happiest and most sad moment of my life, because she would only come home 4 days at a time. I'd be so happy to pick her up from the airport, and I'd be crying my eyes out every time we had to drop her back off. And I had to understand those things in an environment that really isn't conducive to positivity or productivity, where everybody is just looking for a one-up or looking for a way that they can get over on you. And in those self-help classes that I took, I fell in love with the process of just trying to help myself. And I fell in love with it so much that I started becoming a facilitator of it. And I really found a whole bunch of passion and joy in helping other people overcome a lot of those childhood traumas. And, God put me in a position and blessed me for an opportunity that wound up leading me to a firehouse while being incarcerated in state prison.
So, I was a little speechless at first, but I didn't want to interrupt you. I really wanted to, but that part of your story for me is amazing. Just what God will use to get your attention. And it's something that honestly, like me and my wife are walking through right now. And you painted it perfectly. Like whenever you said you heard the voice, like turn to me, and you start accepting Jesus Christ. And like everyone has this preconceived notion that things are going to get easier. Like just because you have Jesus walking with you throughout your life, that things are going to, just be easy. And that's so far from the truth. And it's something that, like right now my wife is learning, and it's something that I'm learning too. And Preston and I posted this on Facebook the other day. Preston and I have a friends group, and we've been doing a daily devotional for the last 6 months, every single day. Of course, some of us have missed here and there, but more or less consistently for 6 months. And it's something that we've recently learned in one of our devotionals, just because you accept Jesus into your life and you're saved, that it doesn't mean everything's going to be easy. Matter of fact, just like you said, it's going to get harder, because when Jesus has you, the devil wants you. And, there's always this spiritual war going on within us and in our lives that we may not even be aware of. So I really love that part of your story, just because of how in the way, like you had taken yourself so far down the wrong road that God had to go take measures drastically to get your attention. And that's what I love about it, is he will get your attention in some way. And I don't want to call Preston out, but Preston sent a video yesterday in our group, and he's talking about being in church, and he's talking about, and I'll let Preston elaborate, but to me, this is exactly what I told him, is he's talking about seeing people in church with their Bible and their notepad taking notes. And he's like, he had the epiphany in his head of like, I do this at fire conferences. Why am I not putting this much effort into my faith? And I was like, bro, because that's what we're into, and that's what you're doing. And that's God getting your attention. Like that's his way of getting your attention, of saying, hey, like your focus is in the wrong place right now. And I thought that was awesome. So it all tied together. I had chills for a second when you were telling that story.
Yeah. It's crazy that this just happened to me yesterday, because we have been doing the devotionals for a while. And Robert, I don't know if you experienced this when you first started your path walking with God and hearing his voice, but I do the devotionals and I read them. And some days I'm like, okay, task done for the day. I read my devotional. I don't reflect on it. I don't feel any closer to God. I'm doing what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing as a good Christian. But then yesterday at church, the way I started off the conversation with the group was, at a fire conference, you see guys like Kyle Romagus, Corley Moore, Chief Scott Thompson, all in the front row, taking notes. They've heard the lecture from whoever's talking 5-6 times, but they're still up there taking notes. They're in the front because, that's just who they are. Right. And so I started doing that. I'm like, okay, I want to be in that circle. I want to be around those people. They're making huge impacts on the fire service. I want to be in the front row. So now every conference I get there early. I get my seat. I have my notepad. But when it comes to church, we show up a little bit later because the worship is loud, right? I go to a big mega church, and the worshiping and the singing is super loud, and we have our baby. So we drop our baby off and we wait for the worship to end. But because of that, we're now in the middle to back rows. And I don't bring my Bible. And I sit down and I spend my hour listening to the sermon. And that's when I looked over and I saw a lady by herself, Bible, notepad, taking notes. And I'm like, that's what I do at fire conferences. You know what I mean? And it was just this like light bulb. And it was God. It was just God just like showing me, you know what I mean? Like, hey, bro, this is what this looks like when you're at a fire conference, but you're not doing this at a church. And you're wondering why your relationship with me is not great. So I had to share that with the group, and that was, it was a big wake up call, and probably another thing a lot of Christians struggle with.
Man, we're humans, man. We struggle all the time, and I think another thing too is when people either hear about faith or giving their life to God, it turns a lot of people away because they think that they have to be perfect. And the reality is that there was only one person that was perfect that walked this earth, and I will never be him. And we all struggle. And, God made a blind man see. So, he revealed your eyes to something. And the only thing that I get from that is, we all have the will to make our own decisions and choices. And I fell at it very miserably with making the wrong decision. I too will get the verse of the day or read the daily bread and do the same exact thing, like check that box. It's like check box firefighting. Like Rick has said, water supply check, like whatever the case may be. And that's just life, man. Like life never stops. Never. It's going to happen whether we like it or not, whether we're doing good or bad, whether we go to work or not, whether the kids are sick or not. Like life happens. It's the only thing that is constant and consistent.
I think, go ahead, brother.
I would say, like, on that topic, one of the most, and hopefully at this point we're just preaching, but I love it. But like one of the most powerful things that have ever been told to me is I felt the same way. Of like, man, I just feel like I'm checking the box. I'm not getting anything out of this. And then like occasionally I would start getting these little nuggets dropped in my head in certain situations. And it was verses, it was scripture. And I was talking to my buddy, Brad, about this, and he was like, yeah, it's a checkbox, but we were doing 75 hard at the time. Right. And it's an investment into the future. Like you were reading those daily devotionals that have scripture in them. It's a investment that you're putting in for yourself to hopefully for the Holy Spirit to help you help someone in the future. You might have a scripture that you might not even knew you remembered, but because of that topic you're talking about, it just plants that in your head, and now you're able to help them along the way. And I've always thought that way too, because I've struggled with that as well. It's just like, it's just a checkbox for the day, But it's the same thing as like, the 75 hard stuff, like taking the picture, like that's dumb, but it's an investment, right? Like, anyways, that was it.
Well, what I was going to get at is like you said, it's just life. We're living our life, whether that's work or faith or family. But I think, when we start mastering these things, we start living our life with intention, right? I'm getting into the devotionals with intention. I'm, dressing my daughter for the day with intention, and also with intention, I have a vision of what the future looks like. I'm getting in the devotionals. It seems like a monotonous task for the day, but little, like you said, John, little nuggets. I'm getting little tidbits of information, whether I think it's actually impacting me or not. They're just dropping into my thought process throughout the day. Strengthening my relationship with my daughter with the vision of dancing with her at her wedding. You know what I mean? So just having those intentions, it's more subconscious than it is actually like we're aware of it. But, sometimes we just need to pause and think about why we're doing these things and remind us, just like the job, we got to remind ourselves of the why of the oath that we took. It's all the intention.
So Robert, whenever you start getting into the fire department or the fire program in prison, and what did that look like? Like, I know you kind of elaborated it maybe a little bit on at firemanship, but like as far as being in prison, but yet a fireman in prison, what did that look like? And like, what were your roles and responsibilities? Were they pretty similar to what yours were, or what yours are now, or at least were when you were on the line, or what?
So the only difference between any fire department and the one in prison is that you just never go home. So, for my department, they call them staffing patterns. So basically what a staffing pattern is when there's a weather event or when there's a lot of fires going on in the state of California, they'll put on a staffing pattern, which is hold all personnel on duty just because of the fire activity in California. And sometimes those staffing patterns can last from 30, 45 days, 50 days and stuff like that. So I call it the longest staffing pattern ever. It's like 2.5 years of being forced or ordered overtime. But there's no difference. We still have to have credentials. We still have to have training. The prison fire department is actually outside of the prison gate. And so we were responsible for 2 prison institutions. We had 2 Type 1 fire engines there. It was an actual firehouse that is no different than any firehouse that any one of us been in. We had bunk rooms. We had an apparatus bay. We had an obstacle course. We had weights. We had a kitchen, a living room, dining room area, captain's quarters, captain's office, chief's office. And specific to the prison that I was at, we had an automatic aid with the county fire department. And so we were able to respond off prison grounds into society for all kind of different calls, to be an extra engine for additional response for things that were going on out in the city of Blythe. It was nothing what I thought it would be, but it was everything that I thought it was. And I thought that the prison fire department, I'd never been there before, just hearing different things. I thought that, there were going to be guards. I thought that there were going to be like very, very strict rules. And basically the only rule was like, don't run away. Don't bring anything back from the public, and don't do anything stupid. And that was it. There were 8 inmate firefighters there. And I was there probably the longest. Just typically they get people there that have maybe like 6 or 8 months before they get released. And I was there for 2.5 years. And every single day that I was there, I did everything that I could to build my faith. A typical day there for me was to wake up at 4:30 in the morning and read the Bible for 45 minutes. And then as everybody else was getting up, like I was already fed. Like my day has already started. As people are getting up, I'm going to check out engines, check out equipment, wipe down the engine. And then by the time people come out to do their equipment checks, like I'm already on to the next task. I'm like 2 or 3 steps ahead of everybody. And that was my routine. I really fell in love with it. I loved everything about it. And it really gave me a sense of purpose. And Preston and I kind of talked about it a little bit with that identity, not having anything to have ownership of because of my childhood, or not being or feeling as successful or relevant as a younger man. Like I really just fell in love with the fire service and what it provided for me in the sense of like self-confidence, my self-esteem, my self-worth. It really felt that I was worthy of being here, being alive. Like it felt like I was doing something good. And I never felt that way before. And the captains that were there, they shared with me that CAL FIRE had an opportunity to work for them. They were one of the only departments that would give people second chances. And it would be pretty difficult to get on with them. And I was ready for the assignment. Like it didn't matter what was in front of me. I knew that I wanted to get into the fire service as a professional career after I left the fire service. And I did everything I could to do that. I just followed God.
Ironically, Robert, those are the same 3 rules that my department has. Like, don't run away, don't do anything stupid. Like that's the same rules we have. I was going to ask you, I'm glad you elaborated on your own. Like, aside from just waking up early and reading the Bible, like, you kind of been, you've kind of been cut a break. You got accepted into the fire program, and I imagine you're doing everything to take advantage of that opportunity. Whenever you were presented with this opportunity, aside from just reading your Bible every morning, like, were there other steps you were taking to be intentional on your walk with faith?
Yeah, I would say that a few of the individuals there at the firehouse, we would get together every so often and just really try to talk about the word. I want to say that these are one and the same, just like Preston, you had kind of talked about. In prison, everybody wants to turn to God. Everybody wants to turn to some type of religion or some type of faith. And one of the very first things that they say is like, God, help me get out of here. God, reduce my sentence, or whatever the case may be. And so you have to just be really careful with the people that you're surrounding yourself around, just because you don't know their true intentions, and you don't know God's plan either. So it's a very delicate walk, because you would have people that would read the Bible every day, but then smuggle drugs in through their visits. And just like today in society, you have people that read the Bible and then go out there and commit really, really horrible things, or they're abusive, and that's between them and God. I am not somebody to judge simply because I like to think that I've been a person on both sides of the road. I was that person that was abusive. I was that person that did drugs. I was that person that committed crimes. And God was gracious on me and my life. So I have no idea where people are at with their walk with Christ. And I would say that it wasn't necessarily things that I did to strengthen or move my faith. It was me more so leaning into it, because I had no idea what society was like. 7.5 years being incarcerated, no phone, no idea, on the way that things were. I never owned a car. I never had an apartment or a house that I rented on my own. I didn't know, I barely know how to fill out a job application. And so I had to really lean into my faith and be directed by my faith to be able to get to where I'm at now. And it was one of those other pivotal moments in my life when I got released. When I got released from prison, I went, the first thing that I did was go to DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, to get my ID, because you need an ID for everything except voting, I guess. But the second thing that I did was I went to the fire station, the fire stations that I had the wonderful opportunity of working with. That was my first real introduction as a grown adult with a healthy mindset, was the individuals that work for CAL FIRE and the county fire department. The professional firefighters that I got to work with, the fire captains at the prison that I got to work with. We talked about it a little bit earlier about those role models, and those role models that I didn't have growing up, or the negative role models that kind of overwhelmed me when I was a child. Now the roles were reversed. I had 5 fire captains at the institution that worked there. These are people that are in the fire service. These are people that have healthy relationships. These are people that are doing really good things. They have kids. They're present in their child's lives. They're telling me about the vacations or the things that their children are accomplishing. They're telling me about their retirement. They're telling me about savings. They're telling me about investments. And then the individuals that I met for CAL FIRE, working and going to calls with them, was just absolutely mind blowing. And I try to imitate that every time that I'm on the job. Is that's exactly what I want to be like. These are very seasoned guys. These individuals would teach me anything that I asked questions about. They would take as much time as I needed to show me something or help me understand something more. And just their presence in society and the way that they treated people was next level. And that's my first introduction with a healthy mindset into the fire service. So that is the only standard that I know. I know nothing less. And those people have had a huge impact on my life. And that's why it's really important for me. I share this with a lot of the students that I teach with at our academy, is that you never know what type of impact you're going to have on somebody ever. And it's important that when we're wearing that uniform, when we're responding on those engines, when we're interacting with the public, like, you do not know the power of how you can change the trajectory of somebody's life just by the way that you treat them, just by the way you interact with them, just by the time that you give them. And it's so important for us to never forget that.
This makes me think of something from your story that you've talked about, like growing up, surrounding yourself with negative people, looking for acceptance, looking to fit in, looking for your tribe, right? Or trying to connect with your father. But as you progressed, you got more mature, you started surrounding yourself with good people. You've talked about in your story about how you had to stop hanging around certain people that you used to hang around with in prison. You had to separate yourself from that. Can you talk a little bit about that journey? Like, what was hardening your mind, or what was going on with your mindset of no longer needing to be accepted by the wrong people and surrounding yourself by good people, like you just mentioned?
That's a great question, Preston. And it's something that I continue to struggle with today. My mindset while I was in prison is very simple, but very, very difficult to accomplish. And I believe in healthy expectations and boundaries. And once I understood what type of expectations I had for myself, it was really easy for me to set up some healthy boundaries for myself. And then once I understood the boundaries that I wanted, then I needed to enforce those boundaries with the people that were involved in my life. And a lot of that came from just my childhood, like things that are going to be tolerated and things that are not going to be tolerated. Like, we get to control that. And in prison, being around people that I wanted to be accepted by, God helped me break through some of those barriers with just understanding that I am already accepted by Him, and that I don't need to seek out any other acceptance from anybody else. And so having some of those crucial conversations with individuals that, I built relationships with while incarcerated, people that I was doing wrong things with, people that were involved in the wrong things, was just simply having a conversation, an adult conversation, that I don't condone this behavior anymore. I'm trying to change my life. And if you continue to participate in those behaviors, then we can no longer have a relationship. And those are tough conversations to have, especially in that environment, because you're holding on to a sense of normalcy, a sense of belonging. And I think that for me, it was probably the greatest thing that I ever did, because it's exactly the way that I live my life today. There's nobody that's going to walk through my front door that I can't leave here with my wife and kids, with me being gone. Like, the things that I allow and tolerate for my family to be exposed to is a direct reflection of who I am as a person, my characteristics and my morals and values. And in that, the exposure that they're going to get, the exposure that I'm going to get to those things is really important. And on the flip side of that, those same crucial conversations that I kind of broke the chains on with the acceptance and neglect and abandonment, like, I had to establish new relationships with individuals, people that were doing the good things, people that were doing the right things. Like, they have already created those expectations and boundaries from themselves. And then here I am trying to come into their world, and they're doing the very exact same thing with me, creating those expectations and those boundaries. And then from my perspective is just being vulnerable and say, hey, these are the things that I've struggled with. These were the people that I was involved with. I'm not trying to do those things anymore. I have no idea how I'm going to do it, but if you give me a chance, if you give me an opportunity, like I'm all in. Like I want to be better. I want to do better. Hopefully that kind of answers your
Yeah,
question.
I'd like to build off it though, if you'll allow me. So
Yeah.
it's easy for us to separate ourselves from people that are not on the path that we're on. But what about in the fire service? People that don't take the oath seriously, people that don't have your expectations, but they are with you in the service that you love. What are those relationships? How do you build on those? How do you try to bring those people along with you in your journey?
Probably a Harry Potter wand.
Yeah.
Man, I think that might be a whole nother episode, man. I think that that's a really, really interesting and diverse question. And I'm going to do the best that I can to try to articulate it. So it doesn't matter which department you work for. It doesn't matter how big your department is. It doesn't matter how much money is running through that place. The unfortunate part is, like I said earlier, we're all humans. And I firmly believe this wholeheartedly is I don't think that we have a leadership problem. I think that we have a people problem. And a people problem to me is individuals that have not dealt with, some of the things that all of us have dealt with and worked through. And we're still struggling with a lot. People that I work with and throughout the fire service, because I know it's kind of a pandemic with people not taking this job seriously, people not taking the oath seriously, people not taking training seriously, or whatever the case may be. There's two things that come to mind, and I share this with a lot of the students: is you never know if you're a waterer or a planter. And so, as a vessel of God, like I don't get to determine whether I'm watering somebody or whether I'm planting the seed in somebody. It's just my job to be able to display the actions with who I am in Christ, and then allow God to either water that person or plant a seed. And if it was up to a lot of us, we'd probably just hire all our pipe hitters and just have the best fire department in the world. And that's the unique thing about it, is that no matter where you go, no matter what profession you're in, you're always going to have the battle of good and evil. And the right thing to do is not necessarily highlight the evil, it's to highlight the good. And I think that the fire service ultimately has done a really good job at that, with reinforcing the morals and values that we stand on, with the oath that we have all taken to the American Fire Service. And we just have to continue to add to that. I talk about, changing the culture. The culture is fluid. The culture is never going to stay the same, because it's always a battle of good and evil. And the good, we just need to make sure that we're adding more good to it than the bad is adding more bad to it. And then over time, probably long after all of us are gone, hopefully the good is the majority and we're no longer the minority. And for me, it's really important for me. I said this on Corley's podcast, is, what type of fire department do you want responding to your grandchildren? Like, my kids are going to have kids, and the investment that I make into those younger people that are coming in today, it's going to be hard to change somebody that's pretty set in their ways, 10, 15, 20 years on the job. But those few people that come in right out of the academy, like if I can plant or water seeds in them, like that's a win to me, because now they're going to do the same exact thing, and then they're going to do the same exact thing. And then the fire department that is responding to my great grandkids and my great grandkids is going to be a hell of a lot better than the fire department that's responding to people that we know now. And so my mindset is more the long game than it is the short game. And I can't say that one is more important than the other, because right now is important, but so is the future. And I think that it's really important just to understand that. I think that, like we mentioned earlier, life happens, and we hope and pray that people have that aha moment, that they want to be able to believe and support the oath like many of us are, but that's not up to us. That's between them and God. I just need to ensure that I am living up to the expectations that I have of my department and myself, and the people that I surround myself around, that I'm walking in faith in God, and that I'm being a demonstration of what exactly the standard is. And hopefully through my actions and my characteristics and morals and values, that I can draw people to that. And we're going to get some, and then we're not going to get some. It's a tough battle that we're all in right now in the American Fire Service.
Yeah, I was, I think that's a big problem, and you're right. I think it's a whole different podcast. We could probably talk for 2 hours just on that alone. But if I could, I love what you said. Like, you're investing in the future, because I'm part of a crew that does our new hire orientation. And we typically, just the way the schedule almost always falls, we get the new recruits on day one. And it's nothing more than like an introduction. We go through their bunker gear and do some SBA confidence stuff. And really the first part of the morning is spent doing one thing. And it's telling these recruits, letting them know that they matter, We're very thankful that they're here. That it's okay to love the job. And we're just planting those seeds like you're talking about, of hopefully what our department will be one day, or continue to be. But one of the most profound things that a senior guy ever told me at my department is, I was having some frustrations and working through some stuff. And he told me this, and it kind of resonates with what you just said. He said, they might have been here longer than you, but you'll be here way longer than them. And it just gives me hope to know that, like, one day, like, as long as we keep doing the right thing for the right reasons, that you're right, that the departments that we serve now will be a hell of a lot better than what they are today. And I always, like, you talked about a little bit, like, it would be awesome if we could just hire all the pipe hitters for one department. Like, that would be dope. And I would love to work for that department. But I do honestly, at the same time, think that we're strategically placed where we are for reasons. Because I love what Rob Ramirez says. He's like, I don't work for a fire department. I work for the fire service. And if we just kind of congregate all in one area, like, we're leaving a lot of the country uncovered. And because we are where we are, we can add value to people and spread that knowledge and the passion we have to other people. And it just exponentially grows and grows and grows and grows. And I love that, though, because while I am super passionate at honoring the traditions and the experience of our tenure, it's so important that we invest in now and realize what's happening in front of our face for the future. And you said it really well, and I don't think I could really say it any differently, but I love that. I kind of wanted to scoot forward a little bit. So your current position now, you're working in the academy, more or less in the training division, correct?
Yeah.
And so, we're friends on social media and stuff, and I see, like, you out teaching in different places, and you have a passion for teaching. And if I remember correctly, that was you kind of found that passion while you were still in prison, right? And there was like an opportunity for you to teach a class or something like that. I would love for you to touch on that, and just how you really found the passion of teaching, and what kind of led you to the position that you are now, and what you get to do there.
I would say the first time that I ever really fell in love with teaching or facilitating or mentoring was from a lot of those self-help classes, and just the satisfaction that it brought me from helping other individuals with early childhood trauma work through some of those things. And then once I got to the firehouse, after about 8 months there, the fire captains would bring in a state fire training instructor to get us our credentials in order to ride on the fire engine. And like I said, I was there for 2.5 years. So this guy would come like once a quarter to, train the new firefighters with a lot of their confined space or auto extrication, their EMS qualifications and stuff like that. And I just really fell in love with it. And then one day he asked if I wanted to help, because I've done 5 or 6 of these classes now, and I wasn't going anywhere. And it really gave me an opportunity to sit before my peers and help in a capacity to help everybody be better. And on top of that, it was just making me better at my craft. It was allowing me to see things from a different perspective, almost a different elevation. So not only was I learning the material, I was teaching the material. And because I was teaching the material, I wanted to know the material. And now that I know the material, it just allows me to operate at a different elevation than just receiving the material from an instructor or a training officer. And then once I got out and once I got into the free world professional fire service, like the only thing that I wanted to do was train, because that's all I did while I was incarcerated every single day. Like that's all I knew. And so just wanting to be better, very competitive, just wanting to be the best at everything. It didn't matter what it was. And almost in an unhealthy way. But, opportunity arose where I was able to take an instructor one class, a fire service instructor class. And I learned so much from a lot of the people in that class. Like I was one of the youngest ones in there. You had a lot of captains and chiefs that were in that class, and I was just a firefighter. And I really fell in love with just the level of intimacy that you get to have with students. And once I promoted to engineer or driver operator with Cal Fire, you're already in that company officer role. And being in that company officer role and having a task book for your instructor one and instructor two task books, you have to have so many hours of instruction. And at this time, I'm already going to conferences. I'm learning a lot of different things from people all over the country. And, our department does a lot of things great, and our department does a lot of things not so great. And I just want to be able to help move the ball down the field in the areas that we are not doing things so great in. And once I committed to training, I knew that, like as a engineer or a station captain, like my direct sphere of influence is just the people that I work with, and maybe a couple interactions from maybe some neighboring stations or neighboring departments. And I knew that if I wanted to have a major impact, that I would need to go to some sort of platform or academy to be able to try to touch as many people as I can. And that opportunity was presented to me. I actually got the job offer while I was at firemanship. Like I was sitting in the stands listening to a lecture, and the number called from the area code that I know that they call from, and I answered it, and they offered me a fire captain position at our training academy. It was like this most surreal moment where I'm at firemanship. I think it was like an hour after I was on stage with John, and I get the call for fire captain. It was just a blessing, all in all. Receive a fire captain's job at firemanship. It was the best. And I took the job at the fire academy. So our agency has 4 training academy sites throughout the state of California. Now, I work at the hub, so we teach anywhere from 40 to 48 students a class. There's 3 battalions that teach, so we can have up to 150 students at a time at that academy. We do a 4-week, it's the state IFSAC Firefighter 2 Academy, and then we roll them right into a 7-week company officer academy. And they've met a lot of the prerequisites already for our department in order for them to promote to a company officer. And it's really, really satisfying to me to be able to sit in front of 40 plus people and be able to not only show them the skill, like how to pull a hose or how to conduct a search or how to throw a ladder or any of those things in the fire service, but more importantly, to be able to connect with them on a personal level and explain the why, share my story, share why it's important to me, why it's important to our patch, why it's important to the public, and be able to give them a foundation of moral and value stability starting off in their company officer journey, because it doesn't get any easier. It's life, man. Like we talked about earlier, like as you progress in life, things you would think would get easier, but in all actuality, things get a lot more difficult. And if you don't have, a quiver of arrows for you to pull out and hit some of those targets, you're going to start to digress really in a rate that is going to be unsustainable. And I just want to help people be better people. That's it.
I love the people conversation, because the more I get involved with instructing, and the more, I learn about, teaching people, like it really does come down to just caring about people, and like getting on an individual level and personal level with each of them, because although you may have a class of 48, like each of those guys may learn a little differently than the next. And so being able to connect with each one of those, and really could end up being 48 different ways, is super important. And just being connected with them on an individual and personal level is really going to help their receiving of your instruction, if that makes sense. So I thought it would be cool to hear about that from you. That was awesome.
I like to look at it as, have you ever like turn on your Wi-Fi and like 50 different Wi-Fis come up, 50 different Wi-Fi options, right? Well, if you click on one, you need a password, and you click on another one, you need a password, right? So I like to look at, I'm not calling the students Wi-Fi, but like each individual student has their own password that you need to try to unlock. And you need to be able, as an instructor, as somebody who's into the job, and as somebody who's not only teaching curriculum and teaching manipulative skills or psychomotor skills, like you need to be able to unlock that password for that person to receive all that information in a way that they're going to be able to retain it. And that password is going to be different from everybody. This is not a generic password or a free Wi-Fi. You have to do that as an instructor, as a fire service mentor. Like that's your responsibility to the fire service. Like the fire service owes me nothing. Like I owe everything to the fire service. So I do everything that I can to try to crack those Wi-Fi passwords.
That's awesome. I love that.
It's like we get frustrated when we try to teach or give advice or influence someone in a positive way, and we come up with this way we're going to deliver it in our head, and we're like, this is going to be gold. And we deliver that message and they just don't receive it. It doesn't connect the way that you thought they were going to do it. And then you get frustrated with them. Like, why are you not understanding what I'm trying to tell you? Well, it's because like your reference of the password is my delivery of the message isn't encrypted in a way for them to understand it. And I love that with the instructor is you have to figure out the best way to deliver that message so that they can understand.
So you kind of talked about it already. So I want to move into it because I know Preston goes to conferences. I go to conferences. I'm pretty passionate about everyone should be going to conferences. It's kind of hard to explain unless you just experience it yourself, especially one as awesome as firemanship was and is. That's where you and I met in person for the first time. And we kind of already talked about that. But you had a pretty incredible experience there. And I'd love for you just to talk about like what the experience was like from everything, from you getting to share on stage and the impact that you made on all the people there, and then going into the socials and everything like that. Like, I would love for you to share that.
Yes, I'll go back to before the firemanship. So I'll try to do the preface as quick as I can. So John Spare and I connected because John, that I've been dabbling around with starting my own podcast and things like that. So I reached out to John on social media and I was like, hey, I have some questions about a podcast. Do you mind if you share some information with me and so forth and so on? He gave me his number and we talked for like 45 minutes on the phone. The next thing you know, he's like, Robert, I need to have you as a guest on Fit to Fight Fire. And that's how John and I's relationship started. Like just by chance, I just reached out for some podcast information. And him and I started talking through vulnerability and transparency. That happened. Well, little did I know that I knew firemanship was coming, but I didn't know John Sparrow was going to be there. And so after our podcast, John called Cody and they had a conversation. And the next thing you know, like I'm getting a call from Cody from BIB, and in my mind, I'm just like a kid in a candy store, right? Like, man, I'm talking to the man himself, and we're having a conversation. He's kind of telling me what his idea is. It's really in the infancy of firemanship, like they're still putting together the plan. And then next thing you know, we we talk about what Fit to Fight Fire would be like. He would like me to share my story. And of course I said yes. And then just the build up to it with all the different things that they had, the lineup, the lecture series that they had going on, and then all the different hot classes that they were offering. I'd never been to a fire conference like firemanship. And not to, put any other fire conference down. It was just one of those things that like I never experienced before in my life. And so like flying in, I woke up at like 3:30 in the morning. My flight left at 5 o'clock from Sacramento airport, and like walking through TSA and everything like that, I just see a whole bunch of different firefighter swag, like in line at the TSA. And I'm like, are you going to firemanship? I am. Where do you work at? Where do you work at? And so just like before firemanship at the airport at 4 o'clock in the morning, as we're going through security, like there's maybe 15 different people that I'm running into with firefighter swag saying that we're all going to firemanship from all kind of different departments. And I'm like, man, this is insane. And we finally get there. They had the social, the first social that night for everybody that was there a day early. The socials were incredible, just being able to be around a whole bunch of people with a whole bunch of energy, all excited about fireman stuff. And I would say the surreal moment for me for a lot of the conversations that I had was just people being people, like the openness, the vulnerability, the conversations. Like there was not a conversation that I did not have at firemanship that wasn't valuable at all. Like it seems like there was not a wasted second. And then we actually get into firemanship day one, and the lineup was super packed. Like I'm a student, I'm sitting front row. I see a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes just because I'm on the firemanship prayer team. Firemanship had a prayer team that was there. That was, praying for people that signed up for prayer, which was next level. Cody and Andrea put that together, and it was something really special. I mean, a fireman conference that had a prayer team and making it accessible for people who needed prayer. And you can do the prayer in person, and you can do the prayer. You can just say that you needed prayer, and then a group of us would get together and we would pray for whatever it is that those people needed prayer about. And so we kind of went through that with Brian Olson, with Andrea and John. And day one was lights out. Day two comes, I'm on the stage with John Spera, and it just feels like I'm in a small bubble with John on the stage. Like you can't see anybody in the crowd or audience. It's just like the lights are on. I'm talking to John, and it's this surreal moment. And I remember John asked if there was anything else that I would like to share with the crowd, and I just remember saying that you can be whatever it is that you want to be if you work hard enough and you believe in it enough. And kind of goes back to what my grandmother shared with me when I was a little kid. And then I was like checked out mentally after that for a couple hours, just because it was like really mentally and emotionally draining to get up there and talk for an hour and 15 minutes. And then I was right back into it. And just going up there and hearing all those little nuggets from so many different people and socializing with everybody. It was like, I would assume it's like just a direct hookup to a Tesla battery, just full charge. Day three, same exact thing. And then we got into the hot classes. So I had a wonderful opportunity to help out with Brothers in Battle with Beyond the Pre-Connect, and just kind of sit back and see how some of the best instructors in the world that teach at these conferences really cut their hearts open and give them to the students there, and see the effort from these individuals that came from all over the country. And it was really refreshing to see a group of individuals that really just poured their hearts out into the job. And that I'm not alone. There's other people out there that love it just like I do, which was really refreshing. And then one of the biggest moments was like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I was never really involved in church. Nobody really read the Bible like that when I was a kid. I gave myself to Christ while I was in prison. I got baptized while I was in prison. Um, and then through prayer and talking with John and Andrea and Cody, um, I asked them if it was okay if I got baptized at Firemanship Conference. And there was a few different reasons why, I decided to do that. One was God put it on my heart. I wanted to create an opportunity for anybody else that wanted to give their life to Christ. And then two is that I haven't been baptized since in, I guess, the free world. And I felt that there was no better place to give my life to Christ than essentially at a firemanship conference, because the fire service in a lot of ways saved my life. Christ saved my life, but it really gave me a lot of purpose. It really gave me a lot of direction. It's given me a life that I could never imagine. It gives me stability and consistency for my family. It gives me a roof and, food to my children. And Cody thought it was a great idea. And, we made it happen. I was baptized from hydrant water, the hydrant holy water, at Firemanship Conference. And it was a surreal moment. I had a tremendous amount of people praying for me as I was being baptized. Brian Olson was the one who performed the baptism. And it was remarkable, man. Just the amount of support, just the amount of openness and vulnerability, just the amount of love that came from everybody, and just the core focus of Christ being at the center of all of it, which I thought was the most amazing thing, with bringing people from all over the country. And people supporting that, people wanting to be a part of that, and people seeing that. It was really amazing. And then Friday was kind of like the day where it was like bittersweet. Like, man, I gotta get on a plane and go back home, which is good. But leaving that environment, like I wish that it never ended.
I think we all feel that way leaving fire conferences, though. Like, obviously we're excited to be home to family and get back to life, but like it's so recharging to go to conferences and be around other like-minded individuals who actually, care about the job and care about investing in themselves and being, good at the job. But yeah, I think we all feel that way. I know the night that you came up to us and you told us that you were getting baptized, man, we were so excited for you. And unfortunately, we didn't hang out to see it happen. But the moment went viral on Facebook and Instagram. I mean, every time you got on your phone, you could see it, and it was awesome. And I was super happy for you, because for me, like, I'm obviously not in your shoes, but for me, it was just like, man, this is like the ultimate redemption for you. Just what you walked through with life, and you're right, like in the way the fire service did save you, and just seeing you being baptized at a firemanship conference. I mean, it's literally what firemanship preaches, faith, family, and fire. And it was right there in the middle of a social event. I know one of our friends, and he talked about it on Preston's podcast, put in for the prayer request during firemanship, and you and John, prayed with him. And he talked about how awesome that was and how much it meant to him. And just to throw a little bit out there for John Spera, like, to get someone's story out there, I don't think anyone could get a better host. He is like, if you look up like what a good listener is in the dictionary, like there's just a picture of John Spera there. And every podcast that he does, I mean, he's phenomenal at listening to people. So the way he was able to just extract really your story and like the meaningful parts of it throughout the entire meaningful story is just it's next level. But yeah, that conference was awesome, and I appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, I think everyone should go to a conference at least once in their life. And if you do choose one, I suggest it should be firemanship, because that's the fire conference.
And the firemanship prayer team is up and live for 2025. So we a lot of people on the back end. I can't take any credit for it at all. But Andrea and Ashley have been doing a lot of work on the back end. They created a QR code, which I'll share with both of you. And then on Firemanship website, they've allowed it for people to start going there earlier to start putting in some of those prayer requests. And we're going to try to make it a yearly thing where we're constantly praying for individuals and putting what is at the front of firemanship, which is faith. And whether people are believers or not, we just want to make sure that we're taking care of the people that are involved in the fire service, not just members of the fire service, but our families and loved ones and everybody in between.
Preston, you got anything, brother?
Yeah, I've heard so much about the firemanship conference, and specifically from our group chat, John, was while you guys were there, all I kept hearing was, God is in this place. God is in this place. And you don't hear that often about fire conferences, right? Like fire conferences are great. They are amazing. There's many conferences. There's big, giant FDIC style conferences, but that is one if you're looking for a special type of walk with brotherhood and Christ, knowing that there's going to be like-minded people on that same path, that's definitely why you should be there next time.
Robert, and I want to be respectful of your time. We've been at it for almost an hour and a half at this point, and your story is inspiring. And I take a lot from it, and I think that it helps a lot of people in the fire service, and just your walk in faith alone, regardless of the circumstances, is beneficial to so many people. I would love for you just to talk, speak life into someone real quick at the end here. Give someone advice, whatever you want to talk about. The floor is yours for just a second before we close things out, man.
If I was to share one thing for a couple minutes, man, this is tough, John. You're putting me on the spot.
Yeah, but if anyone could do it, you can.
Yeah, I would say that it doesn't matter which background. It doesn't matter where you're at in your life. I think the important thing to know is that God loves you, and that no matter what you're going through right now, this is just a page or a chapter of your book, and you get to control the destiny of your life. And if you want something really bad enough, you just got to want it more than you want anything else. And it's super important to know that nobody else's acceptance matters. Nobody else's opinion matters. You have to believe in yourself more than you believe in anything else. And the last thing that I would share is that time could be our enemy, but time is our biggest friend. And the things that we decide to spend our time on, whether that be ourselves, whether that be our families, or anything else, the things that you invest in, you may not see the return right now, but there is a return. And when it comes to the fire service, is that return belongs to the fire service. It doesn't belong to us. And that investment that we make into our wives or our husbands or our children, that investment doesn't belong to us. That investment belongs to them. And I think that if we just remember that, giving a piece of ourselves to the people that we love and care about personally and professionally, that is what is important. Watering and planting, walking by faith and not by sight.
Let's go. I knew you wouldn't let me down. Yeah. Nah. Well, Robert, once again, brother, thank you so much for coming on. I've been looking forward to this for a minute, and I try to stay in contact with everyone I meet, and one person that I try to stay intentional about reaching out to is you, just because, like I said, you and your story keep me grounded, honestly. I love who you are as a person. I love your care, the fact that you care about people and what you represent in the fire service. So I, once again, just really, really appreciate you coming on the show. Guys, that's going to be it for this one. We'll see you next month. This has been the Tailboard Misfits podcast here on Firefighter Nation. If you haven't yet, go ahead and go to the Firefighter Nation YouTube page. They made a new one, and just subscribe to it to stay up to date with everything they're posting on their YouTube. But other than that, we'll see you later, man.